We've heard the rest of the unique tale, and now Gilly and the King of Ireland's son need to go off and find what came before and what came after it. And Gilly also would like the Old Woman of Beer to give him a name. And she discovered that he had the stars on his chest that mean that he is the son of a king. So Gilly has gone to, before she will give him a name, he has to find out what happened to the crystal egg after he left it under a goose to be hatched. Gilly slept as he traveled that night, for he fell in with a man who was driving a load of hay to the fair, and when he got into the cart, he lay against the hay and slept. When he parted with the carter, he cut a holly stick and journeyed along the road by himself. At the fall of night, he came to a place that made him think he had been there before. He looked around, and then he knew that this was the place he had lived in when he had the crystal egg. He looked to see if the house was there. It was, and people were living in it, for he saw smoke coming out of the chimney. It was dark now, and Gilly thought he could not do better than take shelter in that house. He went to the door and knocked. There was a lot of rattling behind, and then a crooked old woman opened the door to him. "What do you want?" said she. "Can I have shelter here for tonight, ma'am?" said Gilly. "You can get no shelter here," said the old woman, "and I'll advise you to be gone." "May I ask who lives here?" said Gilly, putting his foot inside the door. "6 very honest men whose business keeps them out until 2 and 3 in the morning," said the crooked old woman. Gilly guessed that the honest men whose business kept them out until 2 and 3 in the morning were the robbers he had heard about, and he thought they might be the very men who had carried off the Spey Woman's goose and the crystal egg along with it. "Would you tell me, good woman," said Gilly, "did your 6 honest men ever bring to this house an old hatching goose?" "They did indeed," said the crooked woman, "and a hart scald the same old hatching goose is. It goes round the house and round the house, trying to hatch the cups I leave out of my hands." Then Gilly pushed the door open wide and stepped into the house. "Don't stay in the house," said the crooked old woman. "I'll tell you the truth now. My masters are robbers, and they'll skin you alive if they find you here when they come back in the morning." "It's more likely I'll skin them alive," said Gilly, and he looked so fierce that he fairly frightened the old woman. "And if you don't satisfy me with supper and a bed, I'll leave you to meet them hanging from the door." The crooked old woman was so terrified that she gave him a supper of porridge and showed him a bed to sleep in. He turned in and slept. He was roused by a candle being held to his eyes. He wakened up and saw 6 robbers standing round him with knives in their hands. "What brings you under our roof?" said the captain. "Answer me now before we skin you as we would skin an eel." "Speak up and answer the captain," said the robbers. "Why shouldn't I be under this roof?" said Gilly. "I am the master thief of the world." The robbers put their hands on their knees and laughed at that. Gilly jumped out of the bed. "I have come to show you the arts of thievery and roguery," said he. "I'll show you some tricks that will let you hold up your heads amongst the thieves and robbers of the world." He looked so bold and he spoke so bold that the robbers began to think he might have some reason for talking as he did. They left him and went off to their beds. Gilly slept again. At the broad noon they were all sitting at breakfast, Gilly and the 6 robbers. A farmer went past leading a goat to the fair. "Could any of you steal that goat without doing any violence to the man who is driving it?" said Gilly. "I couldn't," said one robber. "And I couldn't," said another robber. And "I'd be hardly able to do that myself," said the captain of the robbers. "I can do it," said Gilly. "I'll be back with the goat before you are through with your breakfast." He went outside. Gilly knew that country well, and he ran through the wood until he was a bend of the road ahead of the farmer who was leading his goat to the fair. He took off one shoe and left it in the middle of the road. He ran on then until he was round another bend of the road. He took off the other shoe and left it down. Then he hid behind the hedge and waited. The farmer came to where the first shoe was. "That's not a bad shoe," said he, "and if there was a comrade for it, it would be worth picking up." He went on then and came to where the other shoe was lying. "Here is the comrade," said he, and it's worth my while now to go back for the first." He tied the goat to a milestone and went back. As soon as the farmer had turned his back, Gilly took the collar off the goat, left it on the milestone, and took the goat through a gap in the hedge. He brought it to the house before the robbers were through with their breakfast. They were all terribly surprised. The captain began to bite at his nails. The farmer, with the 2 shoes under his arm, came to where he had left the goat. The goat was gone, and its collar was left on the milestone. He knew that a robber had taken his goat. "And I had promised Anne, my wife, to buy her a new shawl at the fair," said he. "She'll never stop scolding me if I go back to her now with one hand as long as the other. The best thing I can do is to take a sheep out of my field and sell that. Then, when she is in good humor on account of getting the shawl, I'll tell her about the loss of my goat." So the farmer went back to the field. They were sitting down to a game of cards after breakfast, the 6 robbers and Gilly, when they saw the farmer coming past with the sheep. "I'll be bound that he'll watch that sheep more closely than he watched the goat," said one of the robbers. "Could any of you steal that sheep without doing him any violence?" said Gilly. "I couldn't," said one robber. "And I couldn't," said another robber. "I could hardly do that myself," said the captain of the robbers. "I'll bring the sheep here before you're through with the game of cards," said Gilly. The farmer was just past the milestones when he saw a man hanging on a tree. "The saints between us and harm," said he. "Do they hang men along this road?" Now the man hanging from the tree was Gilly. He had fastened himself to a branch with his belt, putting it under his armpits. He slipped down under the branch and ran till he was ahead of the farmer. The farmer saw another man hanging from a tree. "The saints preserve us," said he. "Sure, it's not possible that they hanged 2 men along this road." Gilly slipped down from that tree too, and ran on until he was ahead of the farmer again. The farmer saw a 3rd man hanging from a tree. "Am I leaving my senses?" said he. "I'll go back and see if the other men are still hanging there as I thought they were." He tied the sheep to a bush and went back. As soon as he turned, Gilly slipped down from the tree, took the sheep through a gap, and got back to the robbers before they were through with the game. All the robbers said it was a wonderful thing he had done. The captain of the robbers was left standing by himself, scratching his head. The farmer found no men hanging on trees, and he thought he was out of his mind. He came back and he found his sheep gone. "What will I do now?" said he. "I daren't let Anne know that I lost a goat and a sheep until I put into her good humor by showing the shawl I bought her at the fair. There's nothing to be done now but take a bullock out of the field and sell it at the fair." He went to the field then, took a bullock out of it, and passed the house just as the robbers were lighting their pipes. "If he watched the goat and the sheep closely, he'll watch the bullock 9 times as closely," said one of the robbers. "Which of you could take the bullock without doing the man any violence?" said Gilly. "I couldn't," said one robber. And "I couldn't," said another robber. "If you could do it," said the captain of the robbers to Gilly, "I'll resign my command and give it to you." "Done," said Gilly, and he went out of the house again. He went quickly through the wood, and when he came near where the farmer was, he began to bleat like a goat. The farmer stopped and listened. Then Gilly began to baa like a sheep. "That sounds very like my goat and sheep," said the farmer. "Maybe they weren't taken at all, but just strayed off. If I can get them now, I needn't make any excuses to Anne, my wife." He tied the bullock to a tree and went into the wood. As soon as he did, Gilly slipped out, took the bullock by the rope, and hurried back to the house. The robbers were gathered at the door to watch for his coming back. When they saw him with the bullock, they threw up their hats. "This man must be our captain," they said. The captain was biting his lips and nails. At last he took off his hat with the feathers in it and gave it to Gilly. "You're our captain now," said the robbers. Gilly ordered that the goat, the sheep, and the bullock be put into the byre, and that the door be locked and the key be given to him. All that was done. Then he said to all the robbers, "I demand to know what became of the crystal egg that was with the goose you stole from the spae-woman." "The crystal egg," said one of the robbers. "It hatched, and a queer bird came out of it." "Where is that bird now?" said Gilly. "On the waves of the lake near at hand," said the robbers. "We see it every day." "Take me to the lake till I see the bird out of the crystal egg," said Gilly. They locked the door of the house behind them, and the seven, Gilly at their head, wearing the hat with the feathers, marched down to the lake. Then they showed him the bird that was on the waves of the lake. A swan she was, and floated proudly. The swan came towards them. As she drew nearer, they could hear her voice. The sounds she made were not like any sound of birds, but like the sound bards make, chanting their verses. Words came on high notes and low notes, but they were like words in a strange language. And still the swan chanted as she drew near to the shore where Gilly and the 6 robbers stood. She spread out her wings, and, raising her neck, she curved it, while she stayed watching the men on the bank. "Hear the swan of endless tales, the swan of endless tales," she sang in words they knew. Then she raised herself out of the water, turned round in the air, and flew back to the middle of the lake. "Time for us to be leaving the place when there is a bird on the lake that can speak like that," said Mogue, who had been the captain of the robbers. "Tonight I'm leaving this townland." "And I'm leaving too," said another robber. "And I too," said another. "And I may be going away from this place," said Gilly of the goatskin. The robbers went away from him and back to the house, and Gilly sat by the edge of the lake, waiting to see if the swan of endless tales would come back and tell him something. She did not come. As Gilly sat there, the farmer who had lost his goat, his sheep, and his bullock came by. He was dragging one foot after the other and looking very downcast. "What is the matter with you, honest man?" said Gilly. The farmer told him how he had lost his goat, his sheep, and his bullock. He told him how he had thought he had heard his goat bleating and his sheep baaing, and how he went through the woods to search for them, and how his bullock was gone when he came back to the road. "And what to say to my wife Anne I don't know," said he, "particularly as I have brought no shawl to put her in good humor. Heavy is the blame she'll give me on account of my losing a goat, a sheep, and a bullock." Gilly took a key out of his pocket. "Do you see this key?" said he. "Take it and open the byre door at such a place, and you'll find that in the byre your goat, your sheep, and your bullock. There are robbers in that house, but if they try to prevent your taking your own, tell them that all the threshers of the country are coming to beat them with flails." The farmer took the key and went away very thankful to Gilly. The story says that he got back his goat, his sheep, and his bullock, and made it an excuse that he had seen 3 magpies on the road for not going to the fair to buy a shawl for his wife Anne. The robbers were very frightened when he told them about the threshers coming, and they went away from that part of the country. As for Gilly, he thought he would go back to the Old Woman of Byre for his name. He took the path by the edge of the lake, and as he journeyed along with his holly stick in his hand, he heard the swan of endless tales chanting.